Mayor, you're live.
Okay. All right, it's 10 after 7. Why don't we get started? So apologies for the delay. There was a, this is a courtroom, and I guess they needed the courtroom for something. So this first piece of business is a workshop, and that'll last through the end of the workshop, and then we'll start up a formal meeting. And so in the summer, we're running our workshops and meetings at the same time. So the workshop, we don't do a formal pledge or roll. I do observe everybody here, except George, who's excused. Is Nick on the line, remote, or someone?
I am. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council.
All right. Hey, Nick. And I see the city administrator here. All right. First item is the appointment of Liz Clough to the position of account clerk typist. Chris is going to tell us how to pronounce Liz's name and then tell us more
I'm
about
just
her.
making it up. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing it correctly. But you look confident when you say it. Clough. Liz is going to be in the finance department. We're proposing the hire to be the position that's at the front window where people come in for the clerk's office. You recently hired another person for that spot, and that person has done really well, and we're moving them down into our accounts receivable area. So Liz is somebody who has a bachelor's degree from New Paltz. She was very well thought of when she was interviewed, and she has a lot of customer service experience, and also some office and accounting assistant work. And so we think she'll be a good addition to our team.
Any comments?
And this is a civil service position, so she will have to take a test. There's currently no list for this position.
When would she start, Chris?
She would give notice to her job tomorrow and start 2 weeks from tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, and can you remind us who's currently covering this position?
Jennifer McGuire,
Thank you.
who we hired a couple months ago, and she's been a fantastic pickup.
And Jennifer came with us with some accounting experience, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, a lot of financial experience.
Right, yes.
So she's really more, we could use her more in accounts payable.
Great, and it's great to have her experience, should we ever need backup in the future as well. So, great.
Okay. Everybody good? All right. So the second one, there's a couple of agreements. One is with the Beacon Chamber of Commerce for the lease of the Welcome Center. Nick, you want to take us through that? Which is a renewal.
Thank
right?
you, Mayor. Yes, correct. So this is the renewal of the lease with the Beacon Chamber of Commerce to operate the Welcome Center, which is located across the away from City Hall on Walcott Avenue. And so what you have in the packet is just the basic lease that we've drafted before, just being updated a little bit. It sets forth the uses to be used as the Welcome Center, and that the Chamber of Commerce will act as the manager of the Welcome Center and staff it at reasonable hours so they can find individuals from the Chamber willing to staff it. Sets forth that is for a period of a 1-year term that can be renewed for 4 successive 1-year terms. The city retains the right to terminate it on 60 days advance written notice. The rent is nominal. Paragraph 7 sets forth the tenant's duties in terms of operating the Welcome Center and providing information to visitors. And also that the utilities are being paid for by the city except for any telephone or internet fiber optics. The city is providing the insurance. The tenant has to get its general liability insurance to cover its workers while it's there. And they can't make any changes to the building or things of that nature. Remember some other boilerplate language. But this is just a renewal that we've been going through and making sure that the leases are current.
Has the Beacon Chamber of Commerce always operated this Welcome Center since it's been there?
To the best of my, yes, they have to. We've been involved since it was first built, yes, and it has been. And then Schedule 8 of the lease agreement sets forth the permitted signage.
Is there a reason why it's a 1-year lease and not a different length of time? I didn't know if there's anything behind that. We've done some other multi-year leases, so I was just curious.
I think it's just to allow for flexibility to make sure that it is being staffed and operated, and should it not be, that we then have the ability to pivot readily.
And we had, kind of a break during COVID in which this wasn't staffed. So they're in a process of rebuilding, and, they have some great volunteers like Liz and Noah who are there consistently. We're hoping that they can continue to rebuild from COVID.
Fun fact, back in 2013, 2014, I volunteered at the Welcome Center. I was one of the consistent volunteers.
All right, we're going to sign you up on the way out today. Thank you.
I just want to add that I appreciate the language in the contract that's about protecting the artwork on the Welcome Center as well.
Noted, thank you.
On that note, I was curious, at one point we had a public art committee. Obviously that spot on the backside of the Welcome Center has had the same artwork up, as far as I know, since any artwork went up there. And I was curious if there was any interest or appetite that anyone had heard of reconstituting that committee or in engaging that aspect of the Welcome Center.
I do remember in 2020, Kelly Ellenwood, who's very involved in arts in Beacon, came before the council and recommended reconstituting that committee, but I don't think that the council followed up on that.
And I know Beacon Arts is working to redo the art on the 5 bus shelters that we have. And Kelly and I had a call about a month ago about that. So that might be on the list, and next time I talk to her, I can ask.
Great.
Okay.
Good, so this would just require a resolution and approval on your meeting in a couple of minutes.
All right. So the other one, Nick, you can take us through is another agreement, which is with the American Legion Post 203 for lease of the Memorial Building.
Correct, so this is for the Memorial Building located at 425 Main Street. It's with the, as the mayor said, with the American Legion. So again, it's another continuation of the prior occupancy. The American Legion has occupied this building for decades, I believe, so this is just formalizing and providing them with a written lease that I understand they will be using in connection with a grant they've received from the New York State Dormitory Authority. So this is the other reason we're doing this. Again, sets forth the location of the properties, the building, the term. So New York State law has a specific section, the general municipal law, that sets forth that leases to veteran organizations can only be for a maximum of 5-year terms. It does allow us the ability to continue those renewals if we wish to do so. It also permits the rent to be nominal. And then in Article 5, Section 5 of the lease was set forth that the permitted use consistent with the veterans of the uniformed service and the associated activities. They're not paying any taxes. The landlord is responsible, the city, for the insurance and the utilities. We are asking for the tenant to provide insurance as well to the because they'll be conducting activities. And we also recognize in this lease that there are other veteran organizations who have equal rights to that building, and that the city also has the right to use the building and coordinate its use with the other occupants of the property. And the city is responsible for the repairs and maintenance of the building. And then there's just some boilerplate language regarding no ability to make alterations and things of that nature.
And this came up, you may remember the veterans did a large landscaping project in front of the building earlier this year that was something like $80,000 worth of work. And they had received a commitment from Senator Skoufis when he was going to run in Beacon. Eventually his district was moved, but he maintained that commitment, and he gave them a $50,000 grant through the Dormitory Authority of the State of New York. They asked us to show that the American Legion actually had rights to the building, and I had provided a letter last fall that we thought was sufficient. And then the folks from DASNY came back and they said, we need to actually have a lease to show that they have a right to be in the building and they can spend this money here.
So this lease is new. This is not a renewal.
Well, it's a renewal of the occupancy. They've been there for, I will tell you, it's 100 years. So
Right.
the land was donated to Beacon in 1923 by a family exclusively for the use of a veterans memorial. And again, it was just after World War I, so you had a lot of returning vets. The city that, at that time, had a vote and bonded $60,000 to build a building. Yeah, think about how much that, I'm not even going to compare that to the firehouse, but the building was for the exclusive use of the veterans. So we've had 3 veterans groups there for some time now. You've had the VFW, the American Legion, and the Marine Corps. And then about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, they brought in Guardian Revival, which works with veterans that have PTSD. And they've done a good job of activating the building. They've been using it for tax advice for seniors. When we get to tax season through AARP, they do blood drives. They've done a bunch of events. I know we've had community quarterlies there. They've been keeping the place up nicely. They did a kitchen refurbishment that no city money was involved.
Mm-hmm.
And then the work that they did on the landscaping, they raised the rest of the money outside of the grant.
There's a 5th group as well, the NAM Knights, in the building. So
Yeah, they meet in the building, but they don't have an office.
yeah, that might be right.
So I have 2 questions about the contract. One, if we could, Nick, if you don't mind, give us a plain English version of what's going on with regards to alcohol and liability. And then my second question is I saw in the contract for the Welcome Center language about the Beacon Chamber of Commerce won't use the property to sell or rent any merchandise. But that, I don't think I saw that language in this contract, and I'm wondering why that language exists in one contract and not the other. And I'm not saying that it matters, I'm just curious.
I can actually field those if you don't. Nick, you want to?
Sure.
Or,
Yep, I do. I'm just looking for the language for the alcohol. I apologize. I was.
I'll let you know because I know what it is. So they do a couple events a year that are fundraisers in which they serve alcohol. As part of those events, we require a special insurance certificate for events with alcohol, so that if somebody were to have an accident or something, there's an extra layer of protection there above and beyond their liability insurance. So we do that too with the beer fest that we have at Riverfront. Anything else, we would require that one-day special liquor rider on their policy. And then in terms of the merchandise, it was actually something that came up about the Welcome Center where they wanted to, there was an idea that they would rent certain things there or sell certain things, and we wanted to keep it more general about all businesses in Main Street. They don't typically sell stuff at the Memorial Building, but they do fundraisers. So they might have something that actually could fall under merchandise, like if they have an auction or something. Then they've given up doing any gambling there. They used to do bingo.
There's no bingo anymore?
I'm sorry to say bingo is done.
What's going on with the board? The bingo board's still there? It is.
I don't know. You're in the weeds, Lee.
The older bingo board it must have been worth something in the vintage market.
Well,
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
And then there's a resolution for this in your voting agenda meeting.
I actually appreciate having a lease. It does clarify who the owner of the building is and who the lessor and the lessee is for the building. My 2 cents has been to encourage the groups to utilize the facility in its fullest, and I encourage the use of the facility by various community groups. I think the vets have been very good about opening up and allowing other groups there, and I appreciate that. So.
Related to that, as we're talking about this, is it a good time just to remind the public who might be listening, just how, if they have an event and want to see if it's available, who they should reach out to, or how that works to access the space?
Yeah, they should just call us and we'll make arrangements with the veterans.
Okay. And it works that basically if the veterans aren't using it already for that time that they want, or if they're flexible and they can find the time when it's free, then likely our they can use it, depending on the type of event as well.
I don't know that I'd go that far. I mean, it kind of depends on the nature of the event and if it needs cleanup. And, I mean, there are rules that come with this. Like when they used to do the Beacon Farmers Market, the farmers market had to pay to clean up the hall. They're not going to clean up after somebody's event. So, again, I'm not going to say this is going to be available for birthday parties, but
Right, right. Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Okay. Everyone good? All right, so the next one is just coming back to our housing discussion. So we've had a few, and I thought what we should just do is have an open discussion about what we're looking to do next. So if you recall, I still have a list of things I put on the table a couple of years ago. I'd like us to get back to some of those. And then I think, Chris, you might have an update on a couple of specific properties we're looking at.
Yeah, do you want that now or later?
Yeah, now's fine.
Okay, so we had a presentation by Heather LaVarnway and Dylan Tuttle of Dutchess County Planning. One of the things we were talking about in that meeting is that the real gap here is for people 30% of median household income up to about 50 or 60%. Really, the only entity that serves that demographic is the Beacon Housing Authority. And the mayor and I have met with various members of the board. I think the mayor has now met with all the members of the board.
One-on-one.
And I've met the executive director a couple times. They've engaged a developer to look at the possibility of adding additional low-income apartments on their property. The layout of their property is pretty inefficient, and they've explored adding as many as 4 to 5 dozen more apartments there. They're not ready to come to council yet, but what they would be looking for, remember we had talked about kind of an overlay zone that might give flexibility to areas. So we might have to look at whatever they want to propose. If that's something that you would support, then they might need some zoning amendments to allow that. Where, again, this is a pretty unique property. You could probably design an overlay zone like you did some years ago with the senior overlay zone on the old hospital site, so that it would just pertain to the one and it would allow them to develop out new apartments. So I'm hoping by the fall that they can come back to us with a conceptual proposal to say, what do you think of this? Do you want to work on this? The second thing is we had discussions about possibly working with the county on the extra land they have at the Beacon Center, or what people know as the DMV, right on Main Street. It looks like the county is seriously considering putting out a request for proposals from a developer to do another infill building on the front of that. And they have considerations that they need to look at, like how to reconfigure the parking so there's no net loss of parking, how to accommodate the farmers market. So they actually even came down on a Sunday to see how the farmer market operates, and they met with the new manager and the new, I forget what Amy's title is, the other manager. So I don't know what they're going to end up issuing, but they do seem interested, and hopefully we'll know more in the coming months.
And the county, when they build something, they have to conform to our zoning?
I don't know that they have to, but I think they will. Because all the discussions that we've had were that we don't want them to just stick down a building that's garish and doesn't fit into the fabric of Main Street.
Nick, do you have a view on that? Does the county have to follow our zoning?
The county does not, so long as it's being used for a public and municipal purpose, but it is being used for in a proprietary function, offering apartments of that nature, then it would have to comply with the zoning.
Okay. Yeah, the only other thing I would add on the Beacon Housing Authority, as Chris said, I have met individually with each of the board members and just trying to encourage them to look for additional opportunities. I think they're collectively all interested in doing that, and there may be some things that we can do to assist that. What I would suggest is that if they come back reasonably soon and need some changes in zoning, I would much prefer us to do those zoning changes citywide, so it doesn't look to be, can totally individually focus zoning. Because we do have, it is a residential neighborhood all the way around it, and there might be some concerns. So, for instance, my guess is that the parking requirement would be one that probably would be engendered here, and we've been talking about altering, or if not eliminating, parking requirements. I think that would be a logical first step that would could be directed citywide as opposed to being directed to a specific area. Another
and
one.
Mayor, just a nomenclature thing. We're not talking about getting rid of parking requirements. We're talking about getting rid of parking minimum.
Yes, sorry, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, it
So
would still be up to the planning board
would
to
still
determine.
have to look
Yes.
and evaluate at the needed use of that.
Right. But for instance, without having a specific minimum,
Right.
the planning board could take into account, oh, well, these are senior residences, and the experience of senior residences on this site are, this sort of parking. And so instead of imposing some number that, ends up with wasted space, they could come up with a different one. Another one might be, minimum size of units. So those might help the process along, and I would just encourage us to look at those citywide as part of the process.
I have a question about the county lot and what the county was looking for. Were they looking for specific bids? Like, were they looking for specifically, like, for the bids to be affordable housing or to be a certain AMI, or was it just like anybody bring anything to the table and whatever looks good to the county they'll go with?
I don't know what they're formulating.
Okay.
I know the original conversation was about smaller apartments that would at least be, lowercase a affordable, as Heather called them. They might not be, like under the Beacon Housing Authority programs or under Section 8, but they would, by their very nature, be less than other market apartments. So I don't know what they'll come up with. They'll probably ask, what can you make work? What they know that we're interested in affordable housing. I'm guessing they're going to look for something that's both mixed use, meaning there's commercial on the first floor and then apartments up above, and also mixed income. So it's going to be some component affordable and maybe some component market. But again, I think when you do an RFP or an RFQ or an RFEI, like a request for expressions of interest, you kind of can put out there, you're testing the market. Like, what do you think you can build on this site if we were to give you or sell you this piece of land with these constraints? So like we did this when I was in Ulster County with the old prison property on Golden Hill and in Kingston for affordable housing. And we didn't know what the market would support, and we got a wide range of proposals. So what they'll do is they'll see what people can propose, and I'm sure they'll ask for our input in that. So once those come in, I'm hoping we see the RFEI or the RFQ before it goes out.
But including affordable housing is an objective of theirs, I hope.
Yes. And it was what we conveyed was our objective.
Okay.
Yeah, my impression is that they will consult with us when they're kind of ready to go to the next step.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I don't know if it's at our impetus, because I think they were also have been considering it, and I think they got a pitch from at least one party. So, but again, I'm assuming that they'll come to us when they're a little more formed up as to what they're thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Can you share a little bit more about that pitch?
I'm not sure actually. So let me not do that, because I'm not absolutely positive that was the case. I thought there was one, but it's hearsay. I don't know it from the county.
I wanted to clarify for the Housing Authority's potential development. You said that they're looking to develop on land that they already own.
Yes.
I wanted to clarify, as obviously the Housing Authority abuts South Avenue Park, sort of what spot are we really talking about? If there's a
I don't know that they've settled on a spot. The developer had kicked around some ideas with them. I went over with the executive director and tried to steer them towards not taking down units. They were looking at some of their lower rise units and saying, oh, if we took these down, we could build up, and the developer wasn't really thinking out of the box that there are 2 parking lots that are underutilized and can be reconfigured so that you're not knocking any units down, and you are able to fit in additional units. So.
Right, and again, this is really up to them to pursue, but I can simply describe there is a lot at the eastern edge of the property closest to Dinan Street that's underutilized, and then there's a lot on the northern side of the property closest to West Center Street that's also relatively underutilized, and then I think there are some low rises adjacent to the South Avenue Park that are a possibility. There's also kind of a service lot adjacent to South Avenue Park. So I think those are the bits that kind of afford, possibly looking at, but I don't wish to speak for them. I certainly don't want to encourage any one thing other than to encourage them to keep thinking their way through it.
But I think their board is looking for an option where they don't have to remove any of the existing housing, because some of it they've kept in really good shape.
Yeah.
And they're looking where they can add and maybe go over the parking lot with parking underneath. So we've asked them to fully explore that and see how maybe even by moving there's wasted space in between the parking lot and the building. In one of the areas that I walked with the executive director, and he and I both agreed that if they could get the developer interested in that would probably be, the least impactful on the existing infrastructure there.
So maybe when we have that discussion with them, if we have that discussion with them this fall, perhaps we could have some maps up.
Yeah,
And,
I would ask them for rendering. I want to see maps and renderings. An idea of like what's the massing of the building? Is it going to be a box, or is it going to have some kind of design?
Yeah, I mean, just a map of all their land, so we know. Yeah. But obviously, site plans and everything.
Yeah, I just think we should be careful because they are a private landholder and they have rights to build on certain things, and it doesn't require coming to us, so it would be a voluntary, and we would invite them, of course, but we just need to be mindful that just like any other property holder, whatever the zoning permits them, they should be able to do, and which is why I'm trying to think through ahead of time. Can we think through some of our goals longer term with respect to encouraging sort of long term building of housing, and long-term look at, what are the right requirements or lack of requirements, which is why I mentioned both parking and maybe unit size might be things that if we thought we wanted to do that long-term and wanted to look at that citywide, getting it done early might create options for them that would assist their process along, right?
Would height also be something for at least for that piece of land that might be?
It might be. I can say that I had originally thought, oh, how about another high rise? But that's not where they're thinking. They're thinking something a little, higher than their low rises, which are 2 stories, which I think makes a lot of sense. But again, I'm very respectful that they're the owners. The board, is appointed. I actually make the appointment. It's the only one that I know of that, because it's an independent housing authority, those appointments are by the mayor without a council approval. I'm not sure there are many others.
I thought it was only a percentage of the board was appointed by the mayor.
There's a couple of residential representatives, and then I think the rest are appointed, but I'm not positive. My one appointment, as opposed to reappointments, my one appointment was an additional residential member, because my view was I wanted additional representation.
And again, I think Nick raised the question whether they're subject to our zoning as well as a independent housing agency. So we're looking, Nick, we're looking into that, right?
That is correct, Chris. Yes.
Okay.
And if it makes sense for if the council thinks we should kind of think through some more of these, we can come back with some specific proposals and a sense of what they might What are they subject to? What might they not be subject to?
And I'd be interested to know how we can be more helpful too in terms of the financial feasibility. You know, if they're making decisions about height requirements based on what's in their coffers, then can we, for instance, apply for CDBG funding in partnership with them? I'm just making things up.
Yep.
I don't know how pre-development and financial, you know, that side works for a public housing authority, but I would assume that the city could provide some kind of partnership if there was something we felt like was a need to fulfill in the city that would get us, you know, more apartments or a different kind or in a different spot.
I don't know if we're allowed to do this, and this would be something the attorneys would have to look at too, but I thought if they create a certain number of the units that we're looking for, 30% of AMI or 50% of AMI, if there's some waiving of the building fees that we could do to help mitigate it. You know, because the building fees can be add-on tens of thousands of dollars based on that, on what we think the square footage could be. The other thing. Go ahead.
As I say, Chris, we've looked into that. I think we may be able to get there, and we'll let you know when we complete the research. The other point in response to the question is it's a 7-member board of which the mayor appoints 5 of the 7 members, and then the other 2 are appointed by the residents themselves, I believe it is.
Thank
So
you.
and the other thing they mentioned is that they have a private developer they would work with because the private developer can apply for the state tax credits that are available. So they wouldn't they wouldn't, as a housing authority, have to front the money. They would basically be making arrangement with a private developer, and then they would work out the numbers. They would have to do the pro formas to make to show that the rents are going to cover whatever payback of bonds that they probably would get tax-free bonds. They would probably get, you know, other incentives like a waiving of the sales tax on all equipment and supplies.
That makes sense. But then again, that developer could also say, no, you can't because it's not financially feasible, and there might be an opportunity for us to help in partnership. at that
Yeah,
time.
I agree.
I agree. Whatever leverage we have. I mean, if there's such a long waiting list there, it's like years.
10 years.
And yeah, it's gotten longer. It didn't used to be this long, right? So I think there's a clear, you know, kind of need there. The other thing is, you know, there are 2 city assets, you know, directly adjacent to the site. One is the community center, and then the other is the park. The park has significant restrictions on alienation of parkland, but I don't know. You know, maybe here's the question, which is, would you, as a council, ask that we try to put together what sorts of things might help, what sorts of, you know, assistance we could do, what zoning might make a difference, those sorts of things, including kind of legal, what we can and can't do, and bring it back.
Yeah.
Right.
This is the first time they've built in a while.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
then it's probably good for everybody to have the conversation and work
Yeah.
through these things, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think they're considering some options over at Ham Fish too, to see if there's a couple adjacent lots that might be in play.
Oh, right.
You
Yep.
know, so they are, and we're trying to steer them away from things like, you know, some years ago they came and said, oh, if you give us land on South Avenue Park, we could build a whole new thing. And it's like you're sitting on all these parking lots that are completely underutilized. Alienating parkland is a really hard process, and we only have so much parkland. It's not like we're going to add any more parkland in that part of the city. So I'm loath to even cross that line, and particularly when they have a lot of space that they could use more intensively.
You know, I'm not asking these questions to influence the project by any means, but if there is underutilized or underused city property that could be leased to the housing authority to build, I like the idea of housing of different income levels being mixed around the city and not having one part of town that's the subsidized housing, you know. So I'm wondering if there's opportunities where we might be able to offer, say, BHA wants to build in another part of town, you know.
Yeah,
I like
I think in future years, I would consider putting out one of our parking lots for an RFP. It's just with the firehouse project and then Fishkill Teller coming, I wouldn't be able to get to that. That's why we were looking for other entities that might have the bandwidth to do this independent of the city.
Oh, I
Because-
meant them.
No, I'm just saying, but to do that property transfer is a whole project, right? We would
Of course it is.
we would want to. I mean, you'd have to do everything from the site survey and understand where your water and your sewer connections are, where the lines are in the street. You might, you know, if you think about some of the lots that John Clark talked about, they're on Henry Street, and it might lead to a broader discussion of, do we really need a Henry Street that's like, you know, 4 lanes width, you know, or do you narrow that and then use some more available space for redevelopment and infill development? So there would be a lot of questions to answer that, you know, again, in a couple of years when we're through these legacy projects, I would love to dive into.
Okay.
We were looking for somebody that could do it on their land, and it
On where?
on their own land, like the county doing it, or Beacon Housing Authority, or the transit-oriented development that Metro North might at some point put a request for proposals out for.
Well, the one thing I heard, Dan, you say, and which is the concept of mixing different income levels, maybe we want to, you know, let them know that that's a possibility too, and that, you know, it also might make the numbers work better, depending on what their financing is, to have some, you know, kind of more at the kind of the 100%, or, you know, maybe even something else, right? The lofts, the West End lofts have a mixture to make the numbers work, right? We got 70 some that were various forms of affordable, and I think it was 30.
They're 70% of AMI.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't pressure them one way or the other. I think let's just see what they come up with. Yeah.
Right, but I think expressing our flexibility, I think encourages them, and I think that's a good thing. Okay, and then on the county, we can try to learn more about where they're at, and just kind of give you updates, but I think what Chris knows is all we know right now, right?
Yeah.
Right, those struck us as the two kind of lead, you know, specific properties that could do something, and as we kind of discovered, you know, specific properties where you get a high number in terms of, you know, affordable returns, so.
Yeah, I like the idea of using those specific potential and hopefully futurely actual examples to talk about whether it be affordable housing overlay or what we can do zoning-wise, and having some concrete things to actually connect it to could help both us and the public kind of understand what we're talking about, so it's not just an abstract what might be built in the future, but no, on these kinds of sites, what might we want?
Mm-hmm. So Nick, is that sufficient direction for you, or we could debrief afterwards in terms of looking for what potential zoning changes might assist this particular site that we might leverage citywide? You know, what options might be for the city to help or participate? Any other zoning looks at that exact site, and maybe others like it, including Hamfish as well as Beacon, as well as Forrestal Heights. Is that good enough, Nick, or should we debrief?
It is. No, I think that's sufficient, Mayor. I have a good understanding.
Okay, that'd be great.
With getting rid of minimum parking requirements, I think that would be great, maybe also to have, if we have experts who can come talk to us. I know Kingston recently totally overhauled their zoning, and they had a whole one workshop just on the parking aspect, and so I think helping us understand it, help the public understand what we actually mean when we say
Eliminate.
Eliminate.
Yes.
You know, all they hear is the eliminate parking, and they have, you know, questions about minimum parking requirements, and so what that actually could mean in practice, how those kinds of things get decided. I think that would be useful for us as we decide what to put into any future zoning or overlay.
So again, you're talking about eliminating minimum
parking requirements, not eliminating parking, the minimum parking.
Which in essence, right, that means the planning board during site plan review would then institute the parking that it deemed appropriate.
Yep.
Yeah, I think having just someone come in and talk us through that for a future workshop would be useful for us, and, you know, maybe with planning
Molly,
as well.
who is that? I mean, we have a planner.
I don't know. I can look. I don't know if the person who presented at Kingston, I'm not sure. There are people who do that. There are maybe it's someone from the planning. There are other documents they've referenced at the planning meetings about, there are other planning codes that exist, or parking codes.
So why don't I have John Clark review that? So, because he knows what's in our code right now, and then he can compare it to what Kingston just did.
Yeah, if he has insight into that, yeah, whoever can speak with more authority and
And
specificity.
they also did other things. They went to a fully form-based code.
Yes, yeah.
They've done ADUs, which we're well ahead of them on.
Mhm. Yeah, short-term rentals. Yeah, there was a number of things in that particular thing that passed last week that were interesting to take a look at.
And, I mean, there has to be, I mean, imagine that driving this conversation would be data about who owns vehicles and how many, and because I worry that our aspiration to have a city with fewer vehicles is ahead of the people who are buying. You know, there's cars everywhere. Just because we want people to ride bicycles doesn't mean they don't have two cars. And, you know, in Beacon, you have to go other places to get certain things, namely, you know, most medical care, so most people have to have cars. So I just don't want to put us in a situation where we're reducing parking requirements and then suddenly we have a parking crisis.
Yeah, I fully agree, because you can't zone what people do in their behavior, right? Because we're all individuals and they make choices. I think and John will have data for this, but I think where we've kind of shown that things like that work is a lot of the new construction. There was a lot of concern about number of kids in school, and we have very clear data on that, and we're not getting that. And it also has data on car counts.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if we get the right kind of new units, it does have impacts, even though, as you would say, but for a general family at all, I don't think we can have impacts
Mm-hmm.
in the same way.
Yeah.
Right? We just have to be thoughtful about what we do.
I would say one of the things that I've been thinking with regards to affordable housing is unit size. I really wrestled with this for a while and have kind of come around to the idea that this could be beneficial. I don't know how we would implement it, and I don't know exactly how we make changes to apartment size in certain areas versus, all the technicalities of it confuse me a little. So I'd like to know maybe what are our options, or what are the different ways that we could address unit size in our zoning, and so we know what our options are and we can have a good discussion around it. I'll tell you my thinking on this honestly has been that at first I was like, well, why should people who have lower incomes be forced into smaller homes? And then I'm trying to move my mother to Beacon and can't find her a place. And she said, I'll live in some place really small. I don't care. And I was like, okay, all right. Personal choice.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's an important lever, and one where, what I would suggest is, Nick's going to look at some items that may affect a particular couple of areas that we have an interest. But I think we might ask John to kind of pull up the list and say, all right, what's in here? The minimum unit size, if I recall, the way you implement it is you just don't have a minimum, and you allow the builder to kind of set where they're heading, right? Because I think we have a minimum size for units in the code right now. But again, I don't recall either. And if we're going to pick up several of these issues, maybe the right way to do it is to have John kind of hear what we're asking about, have him do some research in that area, and then start to think about what else works with those things, right?
And you've heard it from me before. My concern always is that if we make a rule that affects the entire city, then it doesn't. I think we need to be targeted. It's the same concern I had about ADUs, which is there's just some streets that just can't handle that extra congestion. And as we've heard on some of the most recent projects from the planning board, there's people who know that there's certain streets that just can't handle additional homes. But if we can get it right, I'd like to try it.
So we'll have John prepare something for we don't have a meeting next week, but we have an August 21st meeting, and we'll see if he's available for that.
And just to recap, we're looking at parking requirements, we're looking at minimum size of unit requirements, potentially looking at height, as Molly said, and looking at this as an overlay, so potentially citywide, but potentially targeted, or?
I'm not sure about the overlay.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the overlay either. I think that might be one tool, but maybe not the only tool.
Yeah.
You know, like for DMV, I don't know that you're going to need an overlay there, but it might make a difference if we make some change to allow the minimum apartment size to be smaller. Because I know, I talked to the county about having smaller apartments that could be small A affordable, and they were interested in exploring that. Now, whether a developer can make that work or not, I'm not sure.
We should also ask John to see whether the county has any sort of suggested statutes, or they may have developed some, I don't know. But I know they've certainly thought about it. The other thing that we should consider, and this is kind of how I do it in my head, is that if we're doing something citywide, that means it's going to be applying to the 80% of our area that is single family. And I made up the number. It might be bigger than 80, but you know, remember that one map that has, here's all the R1.
It's all R zones, yeah.
Yeah, it's an awful lot of R1. But, you know, we should just be thoughtful about that, right? Because it's obviously very different in terms of use than the other parts of the city.
Mm-hmm.
I do think in the long run, you know, over a couple of generations, we're going to be addressing that over time, but I don't feel obliged to address it day one, right?
Mm-hmm.
The ADUs was one of the very few that was actually targeting for more so kind of single family than other spots, because it, you know, you have to be an owner and has to be owner occupied. But I think other changes, we may not want to apply citywide, right? So we may do it by the type of zone, you know, like a multifamily zone or a linkage zone. Or
Mm-hmm.
So it wouldn't be an overlay necessarily, but it would be by type of zone. That makes
Yeah.
sense. Okay,
Right.
that's the targeting.
Or
mechanism.
transitional.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Yeah. I will say too, sorry.
No, go ahead,
Justice. I want to say that for what we're talking about right now, and this seems to be automatically would apply to the Beacon Housing Authority and the county lot, is that I would want this, at least in the short term, to be tied to some percentage of whatever we determine is the right AMI percentage. So it's not, you know, we might in the future look at changing parking minimum requirements for everyone, but for now, I'm most interested in those that are tied to whatever we agree on is a percentage of affordable housing that we want. So I think that's an important component for me as well. And I don't know what that percentage is, but I think that's, and again, I assume for the county and Beacon Housing Authority, they're probably going to be over whatever that percentage is, but for others, it might be something we want to be specific about.
I think of it as a little bit more of a both and, that there are certain things that we would want to do citywide, but also certain things that we would want to do targeted towards those subsidies that would be required to get to those lower AMI percentages. I guess that's why I keep talking about the overlay, because I'm just trying to think through and understand what the mechanisms for targeting those that type of development versus things that we might consider doing citywide.
Justice?
So I'm actually going to shift the conversation just a little bit. Our focus has been primarily around supply and like figuring out what we as a council can do to address the potential barriers in creating more housing and development in the city. And I've appreciated where the conversation has gone tonight so far, but I've also been thinking about like this question of affordable housing, and I've really wanted to expand it to how do we make sure that everyone in this city has access to housing? And one of the, I would really love to just expand our conversation to go beyond supply and development and figure out ways that we as a council, and this might be just like a dedicated workshop session to address expanding access to existing homes, so like the renter to home ownership pipeline. What can we as a council do to address that? Promoting stability to keep people in their current homes, and maybe that's through incentives for landlords or tax credits. I don't know what we have the power to do, but I would like us as a council to explore that option to figure out what can we do to incentivize making sure that our renters here have stability and that our homeowners here have stability as well. And I also, throughout this conversation, we haven't really discussed sheltering and rehousing strategies, and I know that we rely on the county as far as shelters go, but I know that accessibility for some is accessibility for all, and I don't know what we can do, and I don't really know exactly how the city addresses homelessness and people who are unhoused, but I think that is a necessary part of this conversation that just hasn't happened. And I want to make sure that as we continue, we're not letting that fall through the wayside. And one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot is we've had a resident here that's mentioned that we may not be qualified to have the discussions that we're having. And I know that we all bring experience to the table that is absolutely valuable. And I know that I don't know everything. And I'm looking at places like Kingston and the city of Hudson, who has their own housing department now, and it's just one person, but they have a director of housing justice who is a dedicated person creating housing justice strategies for the city or town of Hudson. And I think that would be something that could potentially help us as well, and maybe we're not going to immediately jump onto creating a whole new department for the city. We haven't started talking about the budget yet, but maybe it would be helpful to have their director of housing justice talk about what that role is, what that looks like, what they're doing in Hudson, and how they're addressing housing solutions beyond just the supply. And I would love to continue the conversation that we're having today and talk about other options, whether that be through tax credits to incentivize people here, whether that be through policies to ensure that tenants are as protected as they can be. You know, I just want to make sure that as we continue to have this affordable housing conversation, we're doing what we can to make sure that the residents that are here now feel like they're seen, they're heard, and that they have a stake in this.
Mm-hmm. So I think that's great. I mean, let me suggest that we just make sure that John Clark heard that, and that he starts to include pieces of that into the discussions that he can put together for us as well. Right.
And I would encourage John to reach out to, if he hasn't already, and talk to Michelle Tulo, who's in the city of Hudson and is that position that Justice was referring to. She has a lot of ideas, and part of what her position does and the service that she offers to the city of Hudson is some of that one-to-one personal strategizing around meeting people's needs. I think that this zoning conversation is very important, and you know, these are the levers of power that the city administration has, and also the service side of what the city can offer. I think Michelle's a really excellent example of.
I think Kingston, too, might have added someone through their Kingston Forward process. I don't know what that person does, if it's similar to Michelle, but that also might be just to connect to see what other cities that aren't that much bigger than us are doing around housing justice. Might be interesting.
Yeah, Hudson's smaller than us even.
So I'm already thinking through financing. No, but I mean, I like it, but it's like, but we're in a county, one, that's flush, two, has programs, did a housing trust, right? And it's like, well.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think is that we don't need to reinvent the wheel, and we don't need to use all of our resources to duplicate things that are already happening. But I want to make sure that we're doing what we can to make sure that our residents have access to the tools that are available, and that we're bridging that connection if it's already there. And that that we're discussing that piece of the pie as well.
Yeah, because we might, I'm sorry, we might discover, I think is the case, that, you know, Hudson's the only city in their county, and their county isn't very big, and Kingston's by far the biggest city, you know, community in Ulster, and whereas we're in this other position where there's a big city that has need, So yeah, I want to find interesting ways to finance as well, and it actually may be getting more bang for our buck that way as well.
I think also when the county was here 2 weeks ago, they mentioned that a component of their housing trust fund is that first-time home ownership, low-income ownership. I think they said they haven't rolled it out or prioritized it yet. They might not even put out requests for it yet, so.
I don't think they did yet.
Yeah, so I think, so there, obviously, the county's already thinking about it, but what are communities that might be ways that want to partner and want to try to bring that into fruition as well?
Yeah, definitely would want to not be redundant to things that are happening in the larger city in our county, and would want to be working in parallel or in tandem with them to make sure those services are being built out for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate that this discussion of supply is necessary because we saw the county's report, and we are lacking. And in the vacancy report that they put out 2 weeks ago, we have no vacancies in Beacon. So if somebody loses access to their housing in Beacon, they're displaced. And so we absolutely do need places for people to move around in Beacon. And I also want to figure out solutions to making sure that people aren't moving around unless it's by choice. And I think we're heading in that direction.
Okay. Again, I don't think we have to solve it all tonight, but I think each time we have a discussion, we should just make sure we have some to-dos and that we start to advance the ball. It doesn't have to be all fronts all at once either,
No.
right? We should, kind of just keep going.
Yeah, and I think we meandered a little bit, but I think after the last presentation that we had, I feel like everybody got kind of focused, and I feel like we know now the types of next steps that we want to take, and I think we all voiced many of them tonight, and I feel tonight really kind of like we're moving in the right direction. I have to say that I'm overjoyed to hear that that BHA and the county may be partners in building new housing, because the reality is the best way to get affordable housing is to build it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would give us a break too, because I think we needed to talk very openly about ideas, including, out of the box ones and everyone we could think of. And then it takes a little bit to kind of get us educated and to start to kind of focus this where we want to be. So I think we're doing fine. But I'm going to encourage us to keep going.
I did just want to underline one of the things that Justice brought up in our ongoing conversation, the need for sheltering. We don't have any emergency housing at all in the city, and whatever thoughts that John or anyone else has for how we can meet that need here, instead of outsourcing it to Poughkeepsie, I would like to see those solutions on the table as well.
Mm-hmm.
Emergency housing doesn't always have to be about people who don't have homes too. There could be people who are temporarily without a home. People who are having lead abatement done on their home or from a fire or something. I think that kind of housing. I relied on that housing in New York City briefly, and it saved our lives.
Okay. Other thoughts, or we got a good enough list to? And we have clear next steps, right? Because we're asking Nick to do something. We're asking John a number of things to come back. Is that right? Okay. You want to do serial bonds?
Yes.
Okay. Less interesting. Yes, sir.
What?
You're going to talk
Less
about.
interesting?
All right.
This is the peak of my night. Yeah. We're talking about sewer here.
I'm so sorry.
All right. You passed a 5-year capital program in July, and it also had with it a financing plan. You'll recall we put money into the firehouse. That was coming out of the city's fund balance. There was a component in the sewer fund that we needed to borrow. So what you have in front of you is a bond authorization. We do that after the finance plan and the capital program pass. In this plan, it's $1.2 million for the Fishkill Avenue sewers, and I'll talk about that in a second, and $600,000 to augment shortfalls that we have in the West Main pump station and force main. You'll recall when we bid the Fishkill Teller Avenue rebuild project, that those bids came in $5 or $6 million over our $7 million budget, and we have to truncate that. So we still want to do all the work out there, and the next phase would be to do the sewer work on Fishkill Avenue, on the Fishkill side of Fishkill Avenue, and get that done so we could repave the road and then work on sidewalks. So that sewer upgrade was $1.2 million. We'll be issuing a bond for that eventually, but it will be some time out. We don't need it immediately, but we do need to authorize it. And then the $600,000 for the pump station and force main, that's a project that's been approved in prior budgets. We're trying to get it out to bid late this year, early next year for spring construction. So we'll be doing hopefully the Teller Fishkill Avenue next spring if the bids come in okay. The West Main Pump Station. What we usually do is we issue bands, which are a temporary bond anticipation note until hopefully the rates come down a little bit. They've jogged up recently, but this authorization basically makes those projects go forward. We really need to be able to have a bond authorization even to do the bands.
So, sorry, Chris, just to clarify that again. So this is not saying we're going to put the bonds out right now.
Correct.
This is giving us the authority or giving our finance department the authority to do that.
That's right.
At the moment they need it. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
And then Susan Tucker, our finance director, will try to do the bands, and then before we go to long-term bond, we also try to pay down the amount. So if we have available funds and we think we can put extra money towards that so that we don't borrow as much and pay as much interest, we will do that as well.
Right, and the bands, the bond anticipation notes, always are at a lower rate than longer-term bonds, right? And
Yes.
so you use that as a way of waiting to see when do you want a bond, right? And, as you know, rates now are up higher. We're hoping they may come down, so if you use, some short-term money a few times, right, you pay a rate, but it's short, and you usually less at the short rate, and then you wait for the long to come to in the number you want to see.
I have a question about the Fishkill Avenue piece. This is for the stretch this would cover the sewer for the stretch that we're definitely doing. This isn't to do sewer beyond.
No, it's the sewer beyond the limit.
Okay,
So
okay.
I'm still, we did the sewer already in Fishkill Avenue and Hannah Lane, where all of the sewer work that is in the truncated project remains in that. So there's some in Fishkill Avenue. A lot of it is on the Fishkill side of where we would stop the project. So
Got it.
this is trying to make up for the piece that we're taking out of the DOT
I see.
project.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So that shortfall, I'm trying to make up probably with 3 or 4 different projects. One is a sewer project to get all of the infrastructure under the ground done. The second would be repaving, and then we would do sidewalks as well.
Okay, great. I don't know when the right time to raise this is, so I'm going to propose this now. But I'm wondering, I've been thinking a lot about the Fishkill Creek District, which we extended up, which I think includes Route 52 along the creek as well. And it seems like there's going to be some ownership changes for land in that area. It looks like the Healy brothers are moving. I don't know the extent of their moves and their changes. But something that I've been thinking about, especially as I look at buildings like the Red Pepper Diner and the Roma Nova and some of the characteristics of the properties that are coming online now, if we should change the zoning in that area, possibly to make it feel more like a neighborhood, perhaps even have Main Street type zoning in some respects, where you have properties, smaller lots that are up against a sidewalk and further away from the creek. And I'm wondering if we want to talk about eventually doing bonds for sidewalks in that area, if that would necessitate, if the council, my colleagues are interested in having a conversation about the zoning of Route 52 prior to that. And we don't have to take that up now, and I'd be glad to talk to any of you to talk about your interests, but that's something that's been on my mind, is how can we create more housing opportunity on Route 52, and also possibly still have commercial and retail space in that area.
I'm interested in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've done the, I think I've mentioned that at council too,
Oh, yeah.
Especially if we're thinking of trying to create access into the Camp Beacon area, if additional parcels become available there that become buildable, and that they come out onto Fishkill Ave, that might create also an area of demand where local shops, there used to be an A&P right there. I don't know if we'll get one of those, but
Where was it?
with the
Or Family
dollars,
Dollars.
the dollar store and mental health. That was the old A&P. But yeah, once you see the first of the auto dealers go, it's very low commercial usage, right? And if we're looking for more intensive use, and we're willing to rezone, that creates opportunity for people to want to build. And by the zoning, we could be encouraging that pattern and set up another, maybe not a full Main Street, but yeah, I think it's a very interesting idea. It's one that would require some planning. I would call it a separate project than the earlier discussion.
Sure,
right?
Yeah.
But I think that
when we talked about this, when Chris mentioned the sidewalks,
Yeah.
I was just like, oh wait, maybe I should just bring this up now.
Yeah.
Yeah. But my worry is that we could miss an opportunity on Route 52 where it becomes more like Route 9 or
Yeah.
it becomes more like Main Street, and I'm more inclined to have things like that Red Pepper Diner looks so nice there, and it would be nice to have more properties like that there, so.
Great thinking.
And we can have John in at the next meeting and ask him to talk about it too. You may not be that far off from the zoning because you have a development that either was before the planning board or got it approved near Conklin Street, where basically replicated what you're doing on Main Street, commercial on the bottom, upper floors with housing.
Yeah.
So we'll ask John to take a look at that.
Mhm.
Because you may already have some of that in place and need to just tweak it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think most of it is GB, General Business Zone,
Oh, is it?
which we tended not to pay much attention to, but I think this might be the right time to take a real careful look and see, is there mixed use? What's the housing? Is there a requirement? Is it an option? If we're going to have a rail trail going right past that in, say, 10 years, boy, that might encourage a real rethink. So I just think it's a really valuable area we should look at. There aren't many areas left that we can. That sort of may open up as a new opportunity, and especially if we can connect it to, the other parts of the city that are still undeveloped in that area.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, along the lines, literally, of the rail trail, want to also make sure that we're have adequate oversight over the Fishkill easements and making sure that we're taking care of that water body in addition to encouraging the right kind of development along it.
Okay.
And all of this means that we have strong support for this bond issuance.
There you go.
Yes, because we need that infrastructure to support the zoning that we
Exactly.
are approving. in
Don't
the
want
future.
that water just running straight into the,
No.
to the river.
All right.
Can't let
Creek.
that happen.
I think that was a suggestion that we stay on the topic and that we pick that.
That left a long time ago.
All right.
Yeah.
Sorry,
But
I
everyone
started.
else,
No, it's
so
good.
what we just said was, we have to make sure John hears this part of the conversation as well, but, keep them as separate items. And then are we okay on the authorizing the issuance of serial bonds?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have no questions.
All right.
Can you remind Chris, the West Main Street, Force Main, is that going on right now, or that's this year, is that next year?
No, it's going to bid at the end of this year and will be constructed next spring.
Great, thank you.
And we've approved, you approved a substantial amount of money for that, but our approvals we had to get approvals from Department of Health and also MTA because we traded some land with them to do that or used an easement, and it took a while to get all of those authorizations. So we, in the meantime, we think that the project got more expensive.
I'm going to call the workshop over unless I hear otherwise. Everybody good? All right. Do we need 2 minutes, and then we'll start a formal meeting? All right, let's take 5. Thank you, audience, for waiting. We're about to start the regular meeting. Just give us a moment. Okay. All right, this is a formal meeting. I got a gavel. All right, so let's start the formal meeting. Good evening, everyone. It's 7:22 according to that clock.
8:24.
I'm sorry, 8:24.
8:24,
You know, close. I'm on the wrong time zone. So let's do a pledge. All right. So I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. All right. I'm doing another roll call. So I see the entire council except George. He's excused. He can't be here tonight. I see the city administrator and the city attorney online. Am I missing anybody? I think we're okay. So first thing is this is the first opportunity for public comments. For those of you that have signed up, you can go in that order. And anyone here in the physical room will have up to 3 minutes to talk on any topic of your choice. And the first one up is Teresa Kraft.
Good evening. Thank you for including low-income housing for residents in tonight's discussion, and not more affordable housing that is not affordable for most. This weekend I met a gentleman who was an architect on the original Forestal Heights project. He was happy to see it was still thriving and glad to hear it has a future of expansion. But he also expressed shock that Main Street and Beacon look more like Westchester since his last visit here a few years ago. I hope everyone's ears perked up during the workshop. Does Beacon really want to be just a bedroom community? Beacon should not readily give up more commercial space. Congestion is real, and we will see more when all of these current and planned projects are occupied as promised. When these projects for 300 to 400 plus units are vying for the same 30 parking spaces when they pop onto Main Street for that quick errand. The proposed Prophecy Theater is a perfect example of a switcheroo. That project team reassured the public how accommodating they've been to them by scaling their project attendees numbers back, only to see at the last planning board meeting that they will have fewer attendees at multiple events scheduled for the same day, which took the total on-site visitor back to the numbers the public objected to. Reading between the lines in the local newspapers and watching the videos, we are becoming a satire of our own demise. Thank you.
Thank you. Rachel? Yeah.
Thank you all. And I came here more to speak about 113 Walcott Avenue, but listening to the beforehand as a resident here, obviously I want the best for Beacon. And the fact that, is the RFPR still available for the prison? I'm going off topic now.
We'll just
The
keep going.
RFPR, is it still out?
I don't know what you mean, so just keep going because it should be your time to talk.
The prison facility.
Hmm.
Okay.
No.
Anyway.
I think she's referencing the RFP for downstate prison, and it is out.
Correct.
It was only
Oh.
out, it's out for 30 days.
Okay, that's the
Okay.
one that's not
And
in
then
Beacon.
It's in
also-
Fishkill.
We're talking about zoning, we're talking about parking, and that all goes to 113 Walcott Avenue. And, hold on, let me just grab my thoughts, because you guys changed everything around on me. So, this is not, and you're talking about, with the Beacon I bought in, zoning was 4 stories, if I was correct, the height you could build. So now we're talking about, you don't want to be New York City. You don't want the pedestrian. I was just talking with Justice earlier today, who is the ward here, about pedestrian knockdowns. Let's just keep Beacon. I don't know what it was before. I don't want to know what New York City was in 1970s. But I also don't believe in prophecy theater. It has never been, it's always been based upon assumptions. It's been based on, oh yeah, well, we'll just build it, and it doesn't mean if you buy it, if you buy it, it doesn't mean your dreams will come true. So this property has no parking. And I guess, I see you guys got me so confused, just like prophecy does. That's it. It's just going to bring mayhem to a residential area with no controls, and maybe it's the planning board that has to decide this, but at the end, you two as the city are accountable. Just like we all are.
Mhm.
I pick up trash when I see it.
Thank you. Shelley Simmons Bloom.
Hi everybody, thanks for your time. Put my glasses on. After 2 years of hearings, the Planning Board continues to consider an application by Prophecy Theatre for site approval and a special use permit for the Reformed Church of Beacon at 1113 Walcott Avenue. This controversial proposal has garnered more than 350 petition signatures against it and hundreds of letters of concern sent to the Planning Board over the last year alone. My husband and I and many of our neighbours are against this project because we chose to live in a residential area, not a business district. Our neighbourhood is zoned as residential, and it's pretty easy to see that a commercial enterprise like an event space for 150 people at a time, sometimes multiple times a day, is completely incompatible with our community. And as we've said many times in the Planning Board meetings, this isn't just our opinion. The Prophecy Theatre proposal doesn't meet many of the standards required to issue a special permit, those being section 223, 18B, A, C, and D, and 223, 24(7)D, 1B, and C. But what worries me even more is that if this project is given approval for a special use permit, then it sets a harmful precedent for every neighbourhood in Beacon, one in which anybody living in a residential area may one day find that the city has approved plans for a large, noisy commercial operation to set up next to their backyard, and they'll have little recourse. Beacon has seen extraordinary growth over these past few years, as everybody knows, and that's a wonderful thing in many ways, but it should never be at the expense of the quality of life of its residents, and I think that's something that all Beaconites, old and new, can agree on. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Betty Wall.
Thank you. I would just like to restate my continued opposition to the Prophecy Theatre proposal. Shelley just gave a great recap of the situation. The neighboring developments and residents have spoken loud and clear, and we are hoping that at the meeting tomorrow, the Planning Board will look out for the best interest of the residents of Beacon and deny a special permit for the proposed event space. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Steve, Jaffe. You came 2 weeks ago, and we took too long in workshop, so welcome back.
Thanks for your time. I too am against the development at the historic Dutch Reformed Church. I'm not going to repeat what everybody just said, but the developers themselves have said that there's going to be more noise, more trespassing, more parking issues, and more traffic. It's documented. I don't understand why a commercial enterprise like this should be allowed in a quiet residential neighborhood. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the physical public part of the meeting that wants to speak? This would be your opportunity. There'll be a second opportunity for public comments at the end of the meeting. Okay. Not seeing anyone in the physical part of the meeting. Ben, anyone online want to speak?
If you're joining us on Zoom and you'd like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand option at the bottom of your screen. If you're joining us by phone, you can press *9. If you're watching on YouTube, you will need to join us on Zoom by visiting beaconny.gov. And right now, Mayor, we have no hands raised online.
Okay. So there'll be a second opportunity if someone has missed out and wants to speak then. In the meantime, we don't have any public hearings, but we do have reports from the council, I assume. And where do we want to start? Molly, you want to start at your end?
Sure. I have a couple things to say about River Pool at Beacon. So they had their annual river swim this past Saturday, and it was a great event, a great day for it. Lots of people came out, and for those who don't know, it's an annual swim that's put on by the organization where people swim across the river from Newburgh to Beacon, and it was great to have both the swimmers who did it. Congratulations for everyone who got across, and even those who didn't, who gave it their try, and it was great to see. It was a beautiful day for it, and also a great event with music and other activities there. I also got a chance, I was kind of connected with that, got involved with the group first, or got connected with the group because they have a pool by Pete and Toshi Seeger Park. It's actually a relatively small pool, so for those who think river pool and think, oh, that's going to be a gigantic thing that seems a little intimidating, it's actually great for families. I know we have lots of people who either have young families in Beacon and who visit, so it's really well set up, and it's safe both for families and for the river itself. They do lots of ways. They've designed it over the decades they've had it to sit well in the river. They take samples from there and make sure not to impact the fish as well. So that is great to see. And so anyone who wants to find out about it, riverpool.org is their website. They're free for everyone who wants to come by, whether or not you're a Beacon resident. And it's open on Tuesdays through Sundays, so just closed on Mondays from noon until 6, unless the weather says otherwise. And they'll be open until Labor Day weekend for anyone who wants to check it out. Lastly, for those who are interested, there's a free citizenship workshop coming up at the Howland Public Library on Saturday, August 19th from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. They just ask that you register in advance, which you can do through the Howland Public Library website, just so they can get numbers, but anyone can come by who wants to find out more about becoming a U.S. citizen. And with that, I'll pass it to Justice.
Thank you, Molly. If you're looking for ways to be involved in your community, I'm going to talk about a couple of them. One is the pandemic really highlighted food insecurity within our community, and while we're not dealing with COVID the way that we were 2 years ago, 3 years ago, food insecurity is still something that is present within our community, and there are ways that we can support our neighbors. There are organizations like Fairground and Mutual Aid Beacon that are working directly to feed our communities, and there are tiny food pantries across the town, as well as 2 community fridges that, if you have the opportunity to, I would strongly suggest donating to them. If you have a little extra, it's sharing is caring. And another way to be involved in the community is I Am Beacon is doing a back to school drive right now through August 27th, and you can donate school supplies to at Key Foods. They have bins at Key Foods in Beacon on Main Street, and those will go directly to members of our community. And they are doing their back to school block party on Saturday, August 19th from 12 to 3 at South Avenue Park, and you can also donate school supplies at that and see all of the amazing community organizations that are out there and just have fun at a great block party. I've been several times. It's a great event. Let's see what else. I attended the most recent traffic parking and safety advisory committee meeting, and since then I have received so many comments about traffic safety from members of my community, so I'm just gonna talk about them or address them here, and then I'll probably send a list to Ben as well if you're not writing them down. I appreciate you, Ben. A number of my neighbors on Rombaugh Avenue and on West Center Street have told me about people driving at dangerous speeds and have been asking for some sort of traffic control around there. There's also been excessive speeding noted on Wolcott Avenue by the pedestrian crosswalks over in this ward, not too far from here. I had a request from somebody for speed limit signs on Main Street, and I also a couple people mentioned to me that the giant electronic sign on Beacon Street at the on South Avenue, on the intersection of Beacon Street and South Ave, it's visible if you're coming, if you're driving north on South Avenue toward Beacon Street, but if you're driving west down Beacon Street, it's on the corner, but you can't really see the do not enter sign, or the electronic sign. There are multiple signs, I know, but somebody asked if it could be like tilted a little. I don't know if that's something that would be considered. And I also had, this is not in my ward, but I had a request for a crosswalk at Duchess Terrace in Verplank. Lastly, I had a couple of people, Lastly, I had a couple of people mention that the sidewalks are really bad on Wolcott Avenue, just east of South Avenue, or past the Beacon Housing Authority, between there and South Chestnut Street. And then I noticed that the sidewalks were really bad outside of 484 Main Street. I watched several people trip while I was having a conversation outside of there over the weekend, so I just wanted to bring those.
444?
484.
I think it's 444 was the worst area.
Oof.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
Sorry.
Yep. Sorry, that's all I got.
Okay.
You got that, Ben?
We will.
I will
Received, thank you.
quickly note that there is a third community fridge that recently opened on Cross Street in Maine. The others are outside of Binnacle Books and at the Recreation Center, just to add a little bit more to Jess's very thorough report. And then the other item I wanted to note is that I know that our Conservation Advisory Committee has been working on a strategy for us to follow up on the CLCPA's goals and operationalizing some of the work there. And I'm just curious when we will should expect to come back to that as a council.
I have nothing to report.
My colleagues reported on most everything that I was going to discuss, but just one quick thing for me is I actually heard from a couple of constituents who watched our last meeting and complimented complimented the council on the quality of the conversation and said that they learned so much. This was our conversation about affordable housing, and they said they learned so much about the intricacies and the complexities of the issue. And they thought it was a really excellent conversation, and one person said they were sharing it with others if they wanted to learn about affordable housing and the problem itself. So I thought that was really interesting. And then I just want to reiterate that I will not be having office hours this month, and I'll restart my office hours on September 17th from 10 to 12 at Trax 1 East Main. And I will be away from email for the second half of August, and hope to get to your emails as soon as I return on Labor Day. Thank you.
And I forgot to interject, I will have office hours Sunday, August 20th from 4 to 6 p.m. It'll be in Pole Hill Park or in Bank Square if the weather doesn't cooperate to being outside. Now to you, Lee.
So I won't add anything else other than for those of you who know, I was away this weekend, so I missed the river pool. I went to a high school reunion in Long Beach, California. So originally my parents emigrated to Detroit. I was from the inner city Detroit, and then Long Beach. It was fun, actually. So, and I'll end it there. So, City Administrator. Oh, and if you want afterwards, I'll show you my name tag. It has a picture on it from my high school yearbook. You'll laugh.
We can post that on social media.
Yeah, I know.
Can we update his picture on the website?
No.
Just a quick update on the firehouse project. We're approaching our second month of construction on our $14.6 million reconstruction of the Tompkins Hose Firehouse. We're nearing the completion of all demolitions, so you'll see we've gone down to the steel structure and the slab. The addition that's being added on the north side of the site, all of the excavation is done now, including a buried tank, and we will be pouring the cement footings for the new part of the building starting tomorrow. So we are on schedule. The team that we have working right now as the GC, the site work, and the rest have been wonderful to work with so far. So you'll be seeing a lot of stuff starting to come up out of that very expensive hole that we dug next to the fire station.
And I've had some neighbors ask and just wanted to clarify that the street will is the one-way is temporary for that construction.
Under the local law that you passed, that sunsets in October of 2024. However, you might want to, as we see how it operates, we might want to look at keeping it in the future if you think it worked. So you can always revisit it. We haven't had a lot of problems with it. People seem to have mostly figured out how not to drive the wrong way down.
And when school starts, it might feel different.
Yeah, it might actually. We'll try to tip it.
They are, they're parking all the way to the end of the corner where South meets Main, where there aren't actually parking spots. So I don't know if we don't want them to do that or if the fire truck has enough width to turn there. It's just something I noticed.
We'll keep an eye on it.
Fire truck just run those cars over. It's okay. Doesn't
Exactly.
care.
That's how they'll learn. They're and then you just leave a mangled car there in the corner.
Well, and also, right now, the fire trucks aren't leaving through
Right,
there.
right,
Yeah,
they're not
you're
going
right.
through there. so.
Fortunately,
That's right.
we're not in the building that's being stripped to the bones.
I had one more thing that I forgot to mention in my report. I have gotten a lot of I've heard a lot of positive feedback around the electronic speed signs, and I've gotten requests for more, and I don't know if that's something that maybe we can put in our budget for next year to add just a couple more around the town, or if we want to continue to rotate them. I mean, the one on Wolcott and Phillips, it's a really good spot to have it, but I think we could use a couple more around the city.
Okay. So let's do laws and resolutions. The first one is a resolution appointing Liz Clow to the position of account clerk typist. Can I get a motion and a second?
Motion.
Second.
So that was Justice and Wren. Any discussion? We just had the discussion. So all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Second one is authorizing the leasing of the Welcome Center at 1146 Wolcott Avenue to the Beacon Chamber of Commerce. Can I get a motion and a
Motion.
Second.
So that was it Paloma and Justice? Any discussion?
I just want to say thank you to all of the volunteers, past and present, Justice, that have kept the Welcome Center going.
Yeah, I think it's a good arrangement, so I got nothing to add. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. So the third one is also a lease. It's authorizing the lease of the Memorial Building at 425 Main Street to the American Legion Post 205.
Motion.
Second.
Ren and Dan, any discussion?
Similar to Paloma, just a thank you to the American Legion and all the organizations that also support the building and have put so much love and care and attention and finances into keeping it going. So I really appreciate that.
And to Senator Skoufis.
And to Senator Skoufis, yes.
Yeah, I'll do the same shout out because I think that the veterans groups have done a really good job in the last few years. I wouldn't call it a challenge, but when I got in, I really tried to encourage them to make the memorial building more available to the community. I'd like to see that used heavily, and I think they've been very responsive and willing to kind of open it up more. I'm very pleased that they've done so many things to improve it. We've certainly done the same, and I'm just glad to help the one project along with this lease. So, any other discussion? So all in favor of this lease for the American Legion, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. And then the last one is the authorizing the issuance of serial bonds for sewer projects. Can I get a motion and a second?
Motion.
Second.
So that's Molly and Paloma.
And question for Nick, is this a roll call vote, Nick?
Oh, he's fallen asleep.
No, he's there.
I know. He's putting the baseball bats back up on the wall.
No, I was trying to hit my mute button on my camera off, and I couldn't do that so quickly. I apologize. So no, this doesn't require a roll call vote. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry.
Do we know the amount issuance, or is that to be determined, or is it an
No,
up
it's,
to?
it's 1.2 million.
And it's an up to, right? We don't have to issue them?
Yes.
Okay.
So if we pay down, but we'll probably pay down other
Yeah.
general revenue items
Okay.
before this.
Okay. Any other questions from folks? All in favor of authorizing the issuance of zero bonds? Say aye. Aye. Anyone
Well,
opposed?
this is a roll call vote.
It is.
Molly?
That's it.
Aye.
Justice?
Aye.
The mayor votes yes. Paloma?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. So we
Thank
got
you.
6 ayes. George is excused.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. It's 8:40, whatever, and we're ready for a motion to approve the minutes of July 24th. Can I get a motion? And a second?
Motion.
Second.
Molly and Justice. And,
I have nothing to amend.
okay. Anyone else? Going once? Going twice? All right, all in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So this is the second opportunity for public comments. I see no one in the physical room who hasn't spoken already. I almost said Colin. Ben, do you have anyone on the internet? Or
Nobody online.
so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I am a little disappointed Colin didn't make a comment.
I know. I was going to call him out, and I thought, oh, no, it's all right.
He knew when to exit the party.
But who made the motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, Ren
Second.
and Molly, all in favor.
Aye.
Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you, Nick.
Good night. Thank you.
Recording